on this show, David, like right up until the moment that I just hit the cameras.
Doing work right until the point. So you were the guy that did your homework on the way to school, or right before class?
Man, there's just too much. There's just too much work. There's too much to analyze. There's just too much I want to dive into and talk about.
It's been a busy week, man. And you got another game tonight too.
I know. I mean, listen, I'm tired. I can't imagine what the players feel like. But it's good. I didn't think I could be this happy about 3-3.
Right. Well, I think you're liking what you're seeing too. Like the results are pretty good for what we've seen, personnel wise. But I think the play, especially as of late, has been a nice little surprise.
Daniel joining us on the chat saying, David with some new headphones, no AirPods. What's even happening?
These are my other ones. So yeah, if it's more comfortable for everyone, I can put the AirPods back in.
Yeah, you're making everyone very uncomfortable right now.
Very nervous.
You know, one thing I did forget to do is turn down some of these clips we're going to play. They're too hot. It's Steve Clifford. He's too hot on the mic. I'll have to do it on the fly. Good morning, quote. What up, Nest? Double M15 in the house. Everybody's in the house right now. We got Double M15, we got Quote, we got Danny. I think we're ready to start the show. What do you say?
Do it.
David will be right back.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
This is Locked On Hornets, your daily podcast on the Charlotte Hornets and the NBA. I'm Doug Branson. There's David Walker. He's back. That's quite an entrance you made there, David.
I wanted to just come swooping in.
You swooped. You successfully swooped. I'm Doug Branson. We are live from the Gittimer.com studios here in BEA, beautiful uptown Charlotte. And we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Search your podcast app for Locked On to get podcasts on the NBA, the NFL, and fantasy sports. Let's get into this, David. We got a big show. We got to talk about this weekend in action, a loss to the Rockets, a win against the Orlando Magic. We've got a game tonight against the Memphis Grizzlies in Memphis, the first back-to-back on the season for the Charlotte Hornets. So let's catch up with some thoughts on this weekend in Hornets action. Friday, the Hornets dropped one to the Rockets. The story in this one was three-pointers. Hornets came into this one defending the three-point line a lot better. The Rockets came into that game on Friday not shooting the ball particularly well from three, shooting a lot of three-pointers, 42 per game, but just not knocking them down. But that got flipped around. What did you see in that one?
I'm sorry, Doug. I totally zoned out. It's Monday morning. Ask me that question one more time.
Welcome to the show, David Walker. So the Rockets were knocking down threes in this one.
Yeah, man.
That was the story of the game. What did you see in that Rockets loss?
Yeah, well, we talked about it a little bit beforehand how they had not been shooting the ball actually that well from three for this season, and they certainly remedied that in Charlotte. I mean, they were launching from all over the place, and they were just falling. I thought the Hornets didn't play a particularly bad game, but look, if the Rockets are going to hit that many threes with that much efficiency, it's going to be tough to beat them even when you have your best night. And I don't think the Hornets played up to their best ability, but they played good enough to win at home, but the Rockets just came in with too much firepower. That's what I saw. I mean, there was a couple other little things, but to me, the three-pointers were the biggest thing. I mean, James Harden, every time the Hornets would get close and make a little push, it was Eric Gordon or James Harden or Ryan Anderson hitting a big three from deep a lot of times. And so that was just too much for the Hornets, I thought.
Yeah, down 4 going into the fourth quarter in a game where, Eric Gordon gets 38 minutes. They only played 8 players. I mean, that was essentially for the Rockets because they were dealing with injuries. It was essentially a Western Conference playoff type of game for them in terms of minutes played. So when you're having to deal with their starters that much, and James Harden and Eric Gordon and Ryan Anderson have that ability to get shots off from anywhere off the dribble and knock them down. It's just going to be tough to beat them on any night. It doesn't matter if you're the Hornets or the Warriors. I think it's going to be tough to beat them when they're knocking down those kinds of shots. One more note from this game. Dwight Howard got Clint Capella into foul trouble in this one, and D'Antoni decided to go small basically because he had to. He had no choice without Nene or Ariza to dispense. What did you think about Clifford's decision to stay with Dwight Howard in the fourth quarter? Asking this to the chat as well here on YouTube, youtube.com/Locked On Hornets. You can watch us live most mornings at 8 o'clock a.m. Join us on the chat. So, David, what did you think about the decision to stay with Dwight Howard even though the Rockets went small? Because there were some people that didn't like that decision.
I just think Howard was such a force in there, and he was creating things for other people in a way that he was creating attention, and he was obviously dominating the boards. So I get it. I mean, it's tough when the free throws are going to be an issue as well. But I think that's something even Rick Bonnell said in the preseason was that, and this is when everyone was healthy, but, he thought that they were going to stick with Howard late in games as well because Clifford does trust him so much. And I think that's what that comes down to. You've seen a couple of times where Howard's even been in a bit of foul trouble early on. Clifford stuck with him, and he's certainly sticking with him late in the game. So I just think he likes what he brings, and we've seen that a lot from Clifford. If he's got somebody that's giving him something, whether it's on defense particularly, that's going to help the overall effort of the team, he's going to stick with them. So specifically for Dwight, I just thought he was such a force in that game. And I realize you've got a bit of a situational scenario there, but to me, he was too good almost. He was too good to take off the floor, I think.
A situational scenario. I like
That's right.
Oh, going with the blank mug. Nothing actually, on that mug. What does it got on there? I can't. It's too hot.
You can't.
The light
faded.
is too hot. What does it say?
It says you rock.
Oh, that's good. That's good. That's a good Monday morning motivation. I like that. Mm-hmm. Well, so here's my thing on Howard in the fourth quarter, okay? I like the word you used, building trust, right? Because this was a game that was going to be tough to win regardless. So why not go with the guy that you need to build up trust with? You need to build up his confidence in his role with the team. And honestly, David, I didn't see anything from Frank Kaminsky or Johnny O'Bryant earlier in the game that signaled to me that they were going to have any better shot at guarding Ryan Anderson or Luke Mbah-a-Moute or anyone else that they were going to throw at the two big positions because they were playing so small. It just didn't look like the Hornets really had any other choice. So why not just go with the guy that, as you said, was a force inside, was giving them a rebound? The only thing is it turned it into a game of twos versus threes, but I just don't see that fourth quarter turning out much differently if you had Frank Kaminsky in the game in that position.
Yeah, and you could really see Dwight concentrating on some of these rebound and putbacks, you know what I mean? Like he was not shying away from the line at all, but I think he was doing all he could to gather, take contact, and at least try and get that bucket for the and one, make the field goal on the foul. He's really trying to concentrate and make those so that he doesn't have to get all the points at the free throw line. But he's been pretty fantastic. I mean, on the boards, nobody's stopping him there. As so far in this season, he looks explosive. And yeah, in that game, man, he was. I do wonder if it has anything to do with not the revenge factor, but we know how Dwight wanted to beat Atlanta. I think he continued to want to beat Houston. Some of his former teams. So
he's played them all now except for the Lakers.
That's right.
Let me just say this, because I've seen a lot of commentary on various social media outlets about Dwight Howard so far, very early in the season, by the way, 6 games in, some small sample size theater going on, but a lot of complaints about his turnovers, a lot of complaints about his points per possession on his post-up opportunities. And to me, David, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like complaining about those things when he's getting a double-double every night, scoring pretty efficiently overall, and dominating the boards most every night for the Charlotte Hornets, getting a lot of offensive rebounding and putback opportunities, a lot of second chance opportunities for the Hornets. Complaining about those other things is like going to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and complaining about bathroom cleanliness. Sure, the bathroom should be clean, but you're at Willy Wonka's magical chocolate factory. Okay? There's candy there that can turn you into a blueberry. This is an amazing place. So it turns mean people into blueberries. Like, just enjoy the candy. Enjoy the experience.
I'm with you, Doug. And I'll say this.
I want more commentary on the chocolate factory. Stay with my analogy. Don't go away from it.
We've got to get away from the take of, hey, someone needs to really work with Dwight on his free throws. Like, this is year what?
This is year 14.
14. Okay. We know this is a thing.
Hashtag enjoy the candy.
Enjoy the chocolate. Hashtag don't worry about the bathrooms. And, first of all, he is working on his free throws. They clearly have someone working on his free throws at this point in the game. It's obvious to me that these are mental things. I mean, Dwight Howard is never going to be a great free throw shooter. I do think he's going to shoot better than he is shooting right now for his career. He's a better shooter than he's showing right now, but it's still not going to be anything that's going to blow you away. So either you've got to accept some of these little flaws with Dwight Howard in his game that are there and that have always been there, and at this point probably aren't going anywhere, and say, this guy is dominating the boards. He's giving you a double-double just about every night. He's been about as good as you could have hoped for. And I just think his difference when he's on the court versus when he's not, what he's given this team on defense, you can see it in the stats. I mean, yeah, you got to stop nitpicking what Dwight Howard has given you in his 14th year.
Okay, let's move on. We've talked enough about this Rockets game. Let's move on to the victory last night by the Charlotte Hornets. They get the win. Final score 120-113 over the Orlando Magic. Kemba Walker's greatness, the story of this one, David. Great game. 34 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds. Was a triple-double threat there for a while. The rebounds dried up in the second half. But, this is his 7th game against Orlando in his career of 30 or more points. He's had 2 40-point games. He just gets up for the Magic.
Yeah, and we talk about it all the time when another team has a superstar and that guy is just better than everyone else on the floor.
Kemba was that guy.
And yeah, Kemba was that guy last night, and sometimes that's good enough to get you a win. And the Magic made a push of this thing, Doug. I mean, shoot, they were 4-1 coming into the game, so they've been playing pretty well. And Kemba Walker was just, the best guy on the floor last night. Wasn't going to have it, and took a lot of things, in his own hands. And that's really fun to see when it's cooking, and he was cooking last night.
Yeah, J-Dog here on the email, buzzbuzz@lockedonhornets.com. If you want to send us your emails and thoughts, we'll read them on the show. J-Dog, J-Money here saying, pretty amazing to have a player that can carry a team like Kemba Walker has. 6 games this year. His performance has been MVP-esque, conversation-wise, not saying he is a legit candidate yet. It is unfortunate we have to lean on him so heavily, though. I know the choices are extremely limited, but the plan to run the second unit until they mess up enough to put him back in is just unsustainable. David, yes, in the second quarter and the fourth quarter, he was subbed in fairly early on to help bandage a second unit that really was discombobulated offensively and struggling defensively as well. He finishes the game plus 22. He came in those 2 important stretches that I just mentioned, and Orlando, like Houston, tried everything that they could think of. They threw the kitchen sink at him. They tried DJ Augustine. That didn't work. Then they put somebody taller on him in Jonathan Simmons. That didn't work. Then they tried switching every single pick and roll, which we saw a lot last year. Teams would start to switch on Kemba and shut things down. But what we're seeing now is that Kemba has Dwight, who's also drawing attention. He's got shooters that are knocking down three-point shots in Jeremy Lamb. Marvin's getting off to a better three-point start than he did last season, especially in the corner. That's been a change for Marvin. He's moved more into the corner, and he's knocking three-point shots down. So we're seeing some changes that are really hurting teams' ability to take Kemba Walker completely out of the game. And, David, I want to go back to your first point. We're seeing the Hornets be able to do to the opposition what we've seen teams like Cleveland and Boston and Golden State do to the Hornets, which is put your best player in with the rest of the bench and use that player effectively to dominate the other team's bench. That's what, Kemba coming in at the beginning of like a minute into the fourth quarter, and absolutely dominating for a stretch, hit like 3 straight buckets. So that's impressive to see.
Yeah, 11 points in that fourth quarter and was just on fire. And we got a little shimmy there, Doug. I don't know if you saw it from your seats,
Oh, I
but
saw
the
it.
shimmy.
It was slow. See, I don't have his rhythm. He's a dancer. I don't have his rhythm, but it was
Oh, does he dance?
he does.
Okay, yes.
Little known fact.
I've heard
Actually,
that.
well, no, it's still little known nationally, I think.
He dances.
But here's the thing, he has fun on the court, and this is something that Dwight Howard mentioned after the game, how much fun Kemba Walker has on the floor and what effect that has on him. And as we've already mentioned, Dwight Howard having an effect on the rest of the team. It was the subject of our latest edition of Inside the Locker Room from last night. Let's take a short break and listen to that.
He brings a level of confidence to your group just because he's such a force in there. I think they look around and say, he made 4 or 5 plays tonight that there's only 3 or 4 guys in this league that can make.
He's opening up so many other aspects of my game, and he attracts so much attention, and he gets other people open, and I don't know if he knows how much he helps us.
That's the one thing that I like, is having, somebody like, Kemba who has that same type of drive as me, but also is going to enjoy himself on the floor. And it makes the game a lot easier, and you play better that way. We're both players that, when we're not uptight and we're not playing tense and angry, we play good basketball.
So some interesting stuff there, David, from Coach Steve Clifford, Kemba Walker, and Dwight Howard. The point there at the end that Dwight Howard enjoys playing with another star on his team that enjoys playing the game, doesn't have to get angry, doesn't have to get tense, and he may be, I don't know, that might be a subtle subtweet of some former players that he's played with, like Kobe Bryant, who needed to get intense, needed to get angry. What is that? Dark Muse.
In his Muse cage.
Where did that go? God, we had so much fun with that. Bring that back. Did the Dark Muse get canceled? Did weird alternate universe Sesame Street get canceled, David?
You could see it on Dwight's face, though, when he's playing. And things are going well right now. And he and Kemba are just learning from each other, too. But you're starting to see with other guys. How about the lob from Lamb? Last night, there's a couple of possessions where Dwight's just rolling to the rim and guys are finding him, right? So that's working across the board. But, yeah, I think you look back over Dwight's career, and it's probably back to Orlando and in Jameer Nelson when he had – that type of point guard. Because other than that, it's been James Harden. It's been, Kobe dominating the ball in LA. So I think this is
James Harden, who was
different.
more of an introvert, both on and off the court. That's the thing. Like Kemba and Dwight, kind of different personalities off the court. I think Dwight more of an extrovert, a little goofy, likes to interact with people. Kemba more, sort of internal. But on the court, both of those guys having a lot of fun. I think that's important. I got a question here from the live chat. When everyone is healthy, who will get more minutes, Dwayne Bacon or Travion Graham? This is actually a really interesting question, and probably only a question you're going to get dealt with here on Locked On Hornets. And it's an interesting question because both of those players are getting compliments from the head coach. Unprompted. He's just, and it's probably something that I expected more for Travion Graham because we've seen that in the past, but Dwayne Bacon being a rookie and, just coming in and having the poise that he's shown, the defense not dropping off from his position when MKG leaves and he becomes the first sub on the floor, being comfortable with the starters. But then you go to Travion, and that was Steve Clifford's player of the game last night because of the defense and the poise that he showed on offense and defense, especially in that third quarter when things were starting to fall apart. He was one of the players that didn't fall apart. So I think that's going to be a very interesting question. Who gets more playing time, David? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would have initially said Travion. We know how much Clifford likes him and has praised him really since he's been here, even when the guy was fighting for a roster spot, which he kind of was up until, right now. But Dwayne Bacon has been so much better than advertised. And so it's a lot of the stuff situational. I think both of them are in good shape, though. I mean, certainly you like what Bacon is bringing with his confidence on offense, but man, Travion brings a little something that this team needs, and like that little, he's got a little dog in him. You know what I mean? He's a fighter, and I think Clifford likes that.
Travion gives the team a little bit more size. But Dwayne Bacon, I think, has the potential to be a really good offensive player. So I think that's going to be a big determining factor in this. Can Dwayne Bacon shake a little bit of this cold streak that he's found on the three-point line? But I think he definitely has the higher upside in terms of his offensive ability. But both of them rebounding the ball really well. 8 rebounds for Dwayne Bacon. And it's just he's just so athletic, David, and he just has a nose for the ball, and he gives an effort. I mean, he was beating guys like, Fournier and Jonathan Simmons. He was beating those guys to rebounds last night, and it really helped the Hornets out, especially, again, in that third quarter when they allowed 37 points to the Magic. It could have gotten even worse. And both Travion and Dwayne Bacon stepped up in certain plays and made it happen for the Hornets. So,
I think the one thing, like you said, a little bit more of the offensive game. And to me, I think back to some of these like end of shot clock possessions when the ball swings around. And I think you'd rather have Dwayne Bacon maybe taking that last shot or looking to make a move. Not that Travion has been bad. I just think a little more of a strength of Bacon. And if he could develop that a little bit more on his offensive side, when everyone's healthy, that may be the more offensive option.
And I think one that could spread the floor a little bit more, because you're not seeing Travion take really any outside shots. Dwayne Bacon not afraid to fire those up. Question here from Quote on the chat, David, are we worried? Game 6, are we worried about Malik Monk yet? 1 of 8 from the field in this one. Didn't get to 18 minutes. 0 of 3 from beyond the arc. Had some open shots. Didn't get to the free throw line at all. -8 on the night. 3 assists, but I thought David looked, even though 3 assists, I thought he looked uncomfortable at the point guard position. He's kind of up and down, has a good game where he feels comfortable, and then this one where, him and Johnny O'Bryant both just could not get in any kind of rhythm. When you're talking about the ball movement stuff that they do, the dribble handoffs, it requires timing. It requires knowing where you're supposed to be, and it just didn't seem like either of those guys could really get on the same page last night.
Yeah, and he had some trouble even with Cody out there as well a couple of times, working on that spacing too. So it's just a timing thing. It's just a rep thing. But yeah, that's what it's going to be like, I think, for Malik. As long as they're asking him to play the point guard position, it's going to be tough. I mean, he's going to have ups and down games. It'll be interesting to see when they get everybody else healthy, and maybe they can move him a little more off ball, even though they've said they're going to have to play him some there too. We've talked about it, Doug. It's just a lot for this to ask of this guy, and right now.
Yeah, and it's decision making and it's feel for the game. Like there was one drive that he had, and I thought he was wide open for at least it would have been a contested layup. He probably would have taken some contact, may have gotten fouled, and he decided to swing it back, and the Magic just read that all the way, and it was a turnover, and they took it to the other end. So it's plays like that. But then I got to thinking, like, look, you don't fall to 11th, I don't think, if you're a player that's going to come in and immediately dominate.
6'3" shooting guard. I mean, that's what the draft was.
Right. So I mean, obviously the shooting is kind of up and down. I don't think that. I mean, I went back and looked at Steph Curry's game log, and he wasn't a monster 3-point shooter his first year at all. I think it's tough, I think, for fans because there was a thought that Malik Monk was a plug-and-play type player, that he was going to be an immediate contributor, and maybe that was unfair to say that about Malik Monk at the time. But I think there's just going to have to be patience, and we're going to have to see what Malik Monk is once everyone is healthy and there's somebody on the second unit to distribute the basketball, and it's not completely on him to do that.
Yeah, and it feels like he's trying to shoot himself into a comfort zone at sometimes, Doug. I mean, he likes to shoot. He's looking to shoot, but it almost feels like to me he's taking some of these shots in hopes of seeing them go in, and that will help him settle down a little bit. And the shots are just, for the most part, are not falling right now. You know, he had a good game against I'm already forgetting games, Doug. He had a breakout game, you know, over this
against
last
Denver.
week. Yes, against Denver. Thank you. So I think that's just, it's just going to be up and down.
Matthew has the counterpoint here, and I think this is a fair counterpoint. Matthew saying Cliff keeps saying he has to play point guard to be good. He's a point guard in Cliff's mind. We have to stop talking like he's a 2, and this is just due to injuries. I think that that's fair, but I think that he does have to become a point guard, I think, or at least a Kemba Walker
play
type
minutes there.
A Kemba Walker type point guard where he plays a majority of his time off ball with a distributor like Nick Batum beside him. But he has to become that. I don't think that he was drafted to be that on day one. I think that's the difference in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, more of like a Jamal Crawford type guy, maybe, or like an Eric Gordon. I mean, really, that's a guy who's a little bit smaller stature, certainly bigger, got
bigger.
Than
he was.
right
I feel like it was a similar type of situation when Eric Gordon came out as well.
I think it's going to be both, though. I don't think it's going to be exclusive. I mean, that's what I took from Clifford's comments, is that he's got to be able to play both of those positions to really give himself a chance at longevity.
Okay, let's move on, David. We got to talk about trick or trend. This is our segment in honor of Halloween. It's something we do every year. David and I each have stats. We're going to throw it at each other and say, is this going to continue? Is this a trend, or is it a trick? Are we being tricked by these stats, these small sample sizes? David, kick us off.
Doug, right now, I mentioned it earlier, Dwight Howard shooting a career worst 36% from the free throw line. Never known as a free throw shooter, and certainly that's been something that's looked bad in Hornets fans' eyes, and I'm sure Dwight's not happy with it either. But Doug, do you think that stays there?
What was the actual?
Trend?
I was focused on hitting the drop. What was the actual number?
36%.
No, it's going to get high. It's going to get higher than that. It's early in the season. I think if he can, get to 50%, 60's the ceiling. 60%'s the ceiling. It's got to get higher than 36. Like, I don't want to complain about the free throws this early on, but I also don't think that he's going to put up these rebounding numbers either. Actually, that's my first trick or trend. Dwight Howard's rebounding so I think that one is a trick. I think it's going to get higher. But my next one is connected to this. Dwight Howard's rebounding average, 16.2. That would be a career high by nearly 2 rebounds over his 2011-2012 season. His 4.5 offensive rebounding average would also be a career high. Is that a trick, or is that a trend?
The rebounding numbers of 16, you say?
Yes.
Man, it's been pretty awesome to see. But if you look back over his career, especially the last 7 or 8 years, it's in that 10 to 12 range. So you got to think at some point that sinks back down. But I don't know. I mean, they're asking so much of him on the boards right now. And I think when they get some guys healthy, that maybe they may take a few of those away. So a bit of a trick there, I suppose. But it's not going to fall much further than 13 or 12. I don't think.
I think you're correct. It is a trick. I think it's some early season high averages, but at the same time he's playing. He looks healthy. He looks happy. Did you see him guard the perimeter at one point in that Orlando game last night? Yeah. Guarding guards, he just looks motivated. He looks like he's just ready to go out and dominate the world again. And I think. Very, very disappointed. Yeah, Rich coming in. Very disappointed. Dwight only got 10 rebounds last night. Damn you, Dwight. Only 10 rebounds. How dare you? Okay, Kemba. My next trick or trend is going to be Kemba Walker, 61.9% true shooting. That's high. That's top among guards. That's top 15. I think it's 11th in the league. 61.9% true shooting. That would be a career high by nearly 10%.
Well, that doesn't seem like you think that's a trend there, Doug, but I'm going to take the overall theme of that. I think this is trending up for Kemba. He's taking another step towards becoming an elite point guard in my eyes. Nights like last night are going to go a long way to that. I think he's playing very well so far for this season, and he's being a leader. And you mentioned he and Dwight playing off of one another. But you look at some of his other numbers, his free throw percentages are up, 3-point percentages are up again this year. Just overall field goal percentage is up a tick right now. So it's early on and still a long way to go. And I think he's got, when they get some of these guys back healthy and he can take a few more minutes off, save some of these legs a little bit, that's going to help him. But they're asking so much of him right now. And I think he's moving upwards. So I'm going to say trend, and that may be crazy because you mentioned the disparity between the rest of his career and that number for this year. But I'm just liking what I'm seeing from Kemba right now.
But that's what's required if he wants to get into that all-NBA level. We said it was going to take a better three-point shooting percentage. He's doing that. It's going to take a better assist rate. He's doing that. He's got the sixth best net rating in the league, averaging 6.5 assists and 41% from beyond the arc. So, yeah, I think it's a trend.
He's been the best guy. I mean, obviously we're biased a little bit here, but I think he's been one of the better guys that literally no one is talking about because you don't hear much about Kemba Walker across the rest of the NBA right now.
All right, you got one more for me?
Yeah, man. Right now, the Hornets are 24th in points per game. That was prior to last night. So their scoring is a bit down across the league. Do you think that stays there, Doug? Trick or trend?
I think that's a trend.
You don't see that scoring getting any better when Batum returns and some of these guys get healthy.
The only thing is I don't see them having offensive firepower this season. I don't think that they have I don't think the 3-point shooting is going to bring that average up enough. I think that's why they have to be a top 5 defensive team in order to have success. I don't think. Yeah, I love Lamb's contribution so far in terms of the consistency in scoring. But, can they stay? It's like once they get all these guys back, but can they still stay healthy through the season? I think we have to see that as well. Maybe if Kemba Walker and Dwight Howard can get that lob going every game and Lamb continues to contribute off the bench like he is contributing in the starting lineup, then maybe. But I think this team still has to focus on being top five in defense, and then maybe 10 to 15 in offense in order to have sustained success this season. One more for you, David, because I really want to talk about Jeremy Lamb. So just what I mentioned there, 15 or more points in 6 straight games, is that a trick or trend?
I think that's a bit of a trick just because when some of these guys get back and healthy, I'll be curious to see how those minutes stay for him. But he's been pretty good. He's been a lot better than I could have thought, given his last couple of years so far this season. So all hail to Jeremy Lamb. Still has a few lapses here and there on defense, and you'll see the frustration from Cliff and plays like that. But as far as producing on offense consistently, points-wise, he's given them what they asked for, I think. But a bit of a trick to have that sustained over the course of the season, I think.
Yeah, he's also giving them something that we didn't expect, that they didn't ask for, and that's passing. And Steve Clifford, after the game, saying that he's a good passer, and people in practice know that. And maybe the rest of the NBA will catch up to that fact. Here's Steve Clifford after the game.
In all the preseason scrimmages, inter-squad, he was the leading assist guy. He can pass. Plus, he's big. He's big. So that's the other thing I think as the year goes on you'll see.
7 assists against Orlando, and you're seeing a couple of them there. There's Kemba screening like he's Steph there, digging down into the free throw line and screening. And then he's using Dwight that's 2 or 3 times last night. He was able to find Dwight, on lobs. So I think that's helping him. And he's making different and watch this decision making. Okay, he decides to get it to Kemba there, to the wide open Kemba Walker trailing instead of taking it himself. I mean, he's showing a level of decision making with his pass that he hasn't before. There's the second lob to Dwight. So making much better decisions on the pass. I think he still has to clean up some of these smaller issues on defense and rebounding to become the sort of max out his all-around player ability that he's starting to tease us with. There's still a few moments in the game, David, where he makes Steve Clifford say drop the big old JC in frustration. So, if he can clean those things up, then all of a sudden you're talking about a huge threat off the bench for the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, real quickly before we get out of here, I got to preview tonight's game again against Memphis. They'll tip off tonight at 8 o'clock p.m. This is their first Segababa, their second game of a back-to-back. The Grizzlies sit at 5-1, best record in the NBA, and this will be their first game against an Eastern Conference opponent. David, what do we know about the Memphis Grizzlies?
Well, Doug, stop me if you've heard this before or if any of this sounds familiar, but their offensive numbers won't blow you away. They shoot a lot of free throws. They don't foul a lot.
And grind.
They're grit and grind, but I mean, you look at a lot of these numbers and they're very similar to what we've seen from the Hornets so far. 22nd in points per game. They don't allow their opponents points per game to get that high, third in the league. They play a pretty slow pace, 30th. Their strength of schedule has been up there 7th, but they're still led by Gasol and Conley. I mean, Gasol is playing about 34 minutes a night, 40% from three, Doug. So we talked about, some of the big guys Dwight's faced over the last week or two. They could get out and stretch the floor. Gasol is a guy that can get out there and make some threes. It's going to challenge Dwight to stay with him a little bit out there. Probably not going to beat him off the dribble or anything like that, but 22 and 10 for Gasol on the season. And when he gets to the line, he's converting at 84% of those. So, I mean, he's a dynamic player at that center position. That's going to be another tough matchup for Dwight tonight. So we'll see those rebounding numbers can stay up where he's had them.
After talking to Brad Rowland and some other people around the Atlanta Hawks organization and watching a ton of tape on Atlanta, in anticipation of Dwight Howard playing for the Charlotte Hornets, David, I was expecting him to struggle against some of these stretch fives and have some issues. But he's shown not only a willingness, but an ability to guard above the free throw line. He's going to have limitations because of his size, but he's just looked quick and athletic enough to hang in there. And look, they eased up on Vucevic and kind of got lucky last night because Vucevic came into the game shooting 45% from three, missed his first 4 shots, and they were sagging Dwight Howard deep, letting Vucevic get those shot opportunities, and they may let Gasol try to get a couple before they get more aggressive with him and just try to roll the dice. But when Dwight Howard has gotten switched on to smaller guards through the pick and roll, he's been able to hang in there, so that's been impressive. Here's something to know about Memphis. 5-0 when their bench outscores the opposing team's bench. They've got Chandler Parsons, Tyreek Evans, Mario Chalmers all coming off the pine. Those are all players on a comeback tour right now. Plenty of motivation. All players that used to be starters on some pretty good basketball teams, and they are playing better than some of the Grizzlies starters right now. Let's some of these names like James Ennis, Jarrell Martin, Andrew Harrison. Those are guys that are starting for the Memphis Grizzlies when they have Chandler Parsons, Tyreek Evans, Mario Chalmers, and it all goes back to this idea, David, that we've been talking about with the Charlotte Hornets, which is, starting doesn't matter as much these days because some teams really want to start with that intense defense to knock their opponent off their stride and then bring in their offensive firepower to face the other team's second unit. And that's exactly what Memphis is going to do. Look, the bench, we heard it from Steve Clifford last night. The bench has got to play better, and they're going to be tested, and it might test Steve Clifford in terms of who he's, his substitution patterns. I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch, like who he leaves out there when they do get Parsons and Chalmers and Tyreek Evans, who is playing much more efficiently than we're used to seeing from him and knocking down his three-point shot as well. It'll be interesting to see who he leaves out there and what kind of defense he gets from the second unit.
Yeah, and a couple of league-leading free throw stats here for you, Doug. The Memphis Grizzlies shoot 31 a game. That's tops in the league. The Hornets only allow 16 per game, also tops in the league. So something's got to change there. We'll see how important the free throw attempts are for this game. But, Memphis is going to make you work, Doug. So that's when we talk about guys like Lamb, when we talk about some of these rookies that are playing big minutes, that's where the concentration comes in on both sides of the floor. And if you make a mistake, Memphis is more than likely going to make you pay. So that's going to be a tough one going into there. They're 5-1 for a reason. They play some good basketball, and they play some tough basketball. And that's been some of the struggles when we've seen Clifford get frustrated with guys. It's when some of the stuff breaks down, the ball stops moving, rotations, are forgotten or don't happen, and the talking stops. So they've got to be locked in. I mean, not an easy task on the second night of a back-to-back on the road. You mentioned playing an opponent like Memphis. They're going to have to bring all of their game mentally and physically, I think.
Yeah, Clifford after the game against Orlando said this: if we break the lineup, we've got to execute. I don't mind guys missing shots, but we've got to know what we're doing out there. If you're not in the right spot in this league, you've got no shot. And that's what happened in the third quarter. So the Hornets have to know where they are against this Memphis second unit. The Grizzlies won their game Saturday against the Houston Rockets, a team that beat the Hornets, even though Mike Conley scored 8 points and Marc Gasol hit 1 shot. So, yes, we're previewing this Memphis game without talking about Mike Conley, who a max-level player, one of the most expensive contracts in the league, one of the better point guards in the Western Conference, and then Marc Gasol, who just does so many crafty things, not only with his ability to hit outside shots and his ability to play high-low, but his screening is, for a guy his size, his ability to screen and then rescreen so quickly can take multiple players out of a play. The Hornets are going to have to make sure that they are in the groove. One last comment here from Rich, who disagrees with me on the offensive numbers that the Hornets could put up this season. He says, I hear you, Doug, but this is why you're wrong. Nick Batum makes people's shots easier. Scoring will go up by 5 points. Okay, I hear you, Rich, and I'll give you something from Dwight Howard that he said after the game against Orlando that might play to your point in the second half of the season. He said, it's a lot of hard work to be able to find the right angle, to be able to give somebody like Kemba just an inch to where you can get to the basket, easy layup, or find me at the rim and finding three-point shooters. Once we master that, we develop that great chemistry off the pick and roll, things will be hard for teams to guard. So that quote goes to this idea that they're really just getting started figuring out how to play with Dwight Howard.
Oh, yeah.
And Kemba said after the game, like, I had to tell Dwight, give me some time to figure this out.
Right.
Be patient with me. And they're going to have to do the same thing when Nick returns in mid-December. I think you're going to see an adjustment period throughout December and into January. I don't think that we're going to see the full offensive potential to this team until February. That's why I say it's a trend, only because I think when the averages shake out, I don't think the Hornets are going to max out their offensive capabilities until February. And that's pretty late into the year with the season starting this early. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
All right. This is a good show. We got to a lot. This went long, but there was a weekend of action to cover. Thanks for joining us here on Locked On Hornets here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Hornets. Tell your friends. That's the biggest thing. We got to get the word out about this podcast. It's the best Hornets talk you can find anywhere. I know you guys watching us live agree. I know you listen to the podcast. You listen for a reason, so share it with a Hornets fan. Tell them about the best Hornets talk they can find anywhere. And shoot us your Hornets questions and thoughts to buzz at LockedOnHornets.com. We always love to hear from you. We're back again tomorrow with a recap of this game against the Memphis Grizzlies. For David, I'm Doug saying go Hornets, go America, beat the Grizzlies. Let's swarm Charlotte.